C. Wright Mills warned us, the end of ideology is always a trap. In 1960, renowned Waco, Texas-born sociologist C. Wright Mills offered an incisive warning in his widely read essay, Letter to the New Left. When powerful actors declare that ideology has ended, Mills argued they are not transcending politics, but actively protecting existing power relations by reframing them as quote-unquote civil, quote-unquote neutral, and today these might even be claimed as the remedy for quote-unquote wokeness. In other words, claims of post-ideology enforce political conformity, the assertion that we have moved beyond ideology is itself ideological, one that disguises power as reasonableness and suppresses structural critique in the name of balance. A prolific and highly influential writer, Mills' classic texts that are still read in many college classrooms today are The Power Elite and The Sociological Imagination. I've taught the sociological imagination in my class before. While Mills' letter was not to Americans, but rather to address authoritarianism in Eastern Bloc countries like Hungary and Poland at the time, as well as Latin America, his warning nevertheless speaks directly to our current moment in higher education, where accusations of ideological tribalism and indoctrination are routinely invoked to justify state intervention. Texas Senate Bill 17 and Senate Bill 37, along with a growing wave of anti-DEI legislation nationwide that I've blogged about for some time now, are framed as responses to an alleged crisis in the academy. Mills asks us to be aware of crisis rhetoric about the academy. We are told universities have been overtaken by ideology, that classrooms have become politicized, and that the remedy lies in restoring objectivity, neutrality, and balance. You've heard these terms. And as Mills insisted, facts severed from structure are not neutral. They are fragments, even fragments of fact, that obscure power rather than illuminate it. Hence, beyond the essential work of research, teaching, mentoring, and publishing, our responsibility as professors, scholars, researchers, and public intellectuals is to connect the dots, to expose patterns of inequality, to name structures and make power relations visible. What he called the end of ideology posture was not the absence of politics, but its concealment. It allowed criticism only in pieces, never in patterns, permitted facts, but forbade their connection, tolerated dissent, so long as it never rose to the level of structural analysis. We see this playing out in State Board of Education curriculum discussions, as well as in high-stakes testing. Mills argued that public thinking of consequence is ideological. Why? Because it necessarily involves judgments about institutions, authority, and human values. This, Mills warned, is how democratic debate quietly dies. Throughout his writings, Mills was preoccupied not simply with economic inequality, but with the concentration of power among elites and the strategies through which they sustain and reproduce existing power relations and social structure. In Mills' terms, claims of crisis function as ideological instruments. They frame the university not as a site of inquiry and deliberation, but as a problem to be managed, disciplined, and realigned with state priorities. Under this logic, teaching about race, gender, colonialism, or power is recast as partisan excess, while laws that restrict such teaching are presented as neutral safeguards of objectivity. When those in power declare an end of ideology, Mills showed what they are really demanding is compliance with their own. This rhetoric of reasonableness, measured in tone, managerial in posture, and deeply political in effect, isolates facts from structures and treats conflict as aberration rather than evidence. It forecloses the very questions universities exist to ask. The supposed crisis thus becomes a justification for intervention, curriculum oversight, faculty discipline, and the dismantling of DEI infrastructures under the banner of restoring balance. Senate Bill 17 does not ban speech outright. It bans connection. Senate Bill 37 does not eliminate academic freedom. It conditions it. Together they regulate how knowledge may be assembled, which histories may be contextualized, and whether patterns of inequality may be named as systemic rather than incidental. This is precisely the condition Mills warned against, a public sphere in which ideology is disavowed, even as it is rigorously enforced. Mills was especially clear about what happens when traditional democratic channels grow brittle or complicit. In such moments, the responsibility to name public issues does not disappear. It shifts to students, educators, writers, bloggers, and cultural workers. Their refusal of apathy is not extremism. It is the lifeblood of democratic life. Universities are not endangered by ideological conflict. They are endangered by enforced quietism. If there's a crisis in higher education today, it's not one of excessive ideology. It is a crisis of suppressed imagination. Mill's lesson remains urgent. When power demands neutrality, we must ask, whose values are being protected and whose truths are being rendered unspeakable? Thanks for listening.